Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with CJ Lyons. CJ is the New York Times best-selling author of 16 novels described as thrillers with heart. Her FBI thriller series continues to dominate the Amazon charts, but today we're talking about her latest novel Blind Faith, which has just been released. CJ and I have also worked on the Pro Writer series of multimedia courses together, so welcome CJ.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. Lovely to see you again.
We're both recuperating from Thriller Fest, so
We
we
are,
look
and
a little.
it was awesome, and I'm going to come back to that. But let's start with Blind Faith. So it's released July 31st, which is next week as we start. But the story of how it came to be is a fascinating one. So I wondered if you could start by telling us that the story of the story.
Oh, absolutely. But I should mention first, because I really do owe my publishers in the UK a little note of applause. Little Brown UK is releasing the Blind Faith ebook on the same day, July 31st, that the Blind Faith paperback and ebook comes out in the United States from St. Martin's. So
Yes.
thank you, Little Brown. That was so thoughtful of you guys to do that for me. Okay, so how did we even get here? Well, the story behind the actual story of Blind Faith, I was actually inspired by a newspaper article. And I was working as a pediatrician at the time, and it described a mother's journey. She was physically walking across one of our major highways, close to 800 miles, searching for the graves of her two children. What had happened was she was divorced, and her ex-husband had taken the kids for a weekend and just never returned. And he abducted them. They tracked him down, but he committed suicide before he told them where the bodies of the children were. And so all she knew was that he had been sighted along this one highway, and it had to be somewhere along there. So my heart just went out for her as I thought of, here's this mother grieving, and yet unable to really move on with her life because her grief is just so devastating until she finds her kids and is able to bring them home and find that closure. But of course, then the thriller writer of me was just awestruck of the level of just betrayal. That a man that you love, that you raised a family with, could do that to you. And what would make someone feel that compelled to go that far? So in Blind Faith, what I started with is a mother watching the execution of a serial killer who's confessed to killing her son and her husband. And she's a school teacher, so she has the summer off, so she's vowed to take that summer to find their graves, to find their bodies and bring them home. And I actually started writing the book as a grief journal. In this character. And as I was writing her little entries in her grief journal, it was interesting because I found myself actually physically weeping and crying, and I realized I was actually still, even all this time later, exploring the grief I had surrounding the murder of my friend when I was an intern at Children's Hospital Pittsburgh. So it was really, it was painful and yet cathartic at the same time to write these entries, and then to build this character around them that could come from such despair and devastation and find her strength and find an ability to just keep going and to face whatever obstacles and betrayals are in her path. And so she actually starts as a rather weak character because she is mired in this grief and can't move on with her life, but then transforms into this very powerful woman who is able to once again believe in the power of love, but also to forgive the ultimate betrayal by her husband.
No, it sounds fantastic. And what about the publishing journey? Because the audience are writers, and they are fascinated with how did this book get to where it is about to be now launched with traditional big fanfare.
Well, it's kind of an interesting synchronicity because the publishing journey actually also started with a period of mourning and grief. I was actually contracted for 2 novels with a New York City publisher, And I was so excited about a new career in writing that I had made a huge leap of faith. And I had left my career in medicine. After 17 years, I left my practice and I moved 1,000 miles away from home and I quit my job to write full time. Well, 90 days before my first book was due to come out, the publisher canceled the contract or actually they didn't cancel the contract, they canceled the book because of cover art difficulties. So something I had no control over. And suddenly my dream debut is gone. And I didn't know what to do. Of course, I felt sorry for myself at first, but, I had no choice but to keep writing. This is my new career. I couldn't go back. So I kept writing, and while I was writing, I fought to get the rights back on those books. 2 weeks after we got the rights back, Berkeley actually came to me and invited me to write a new series, create it totally from scratch for them. So that was kind of very fulfilling because that told me that, keeping on writing is the right thing to do. But here's where karma really shows her sense of humor. The book I wrote while I was going through that turmoil and I had lost my dream debut and I was unemployed for the first time in my life and just had no idea how I was going to, make it all work out, that was Blind Faith. So Blind Faith, then I indie published it in the end of 2010, and in July and August of 2011, it debuted at #2 on the New York Times list and climbed as high as #4 in the USA Today bestselling list. And then in September, St. Martin's Press bought the rights to it. So it went from indie published, hitting the New York Times list, to being sold to St. Martin's. And then my editor at St. Martin's fell in love with one of the secondary characters who had a rather bad ending in the first version. So we gave him a chance for redemption. And so there's a new ending in the new print version. And that's the version that's coming out July 31st in mass market and as a new ebook.
And I love the story because it pretty much shows you that you can do lots of different things with books over time. It's not, there's not necessarily one solution fits all books. So you're now successfully managing this. We're calling it a hybrid author career. You have some books indie, and your indie books right now, as we said, your FBI thrillers and some of your other ones are doing amazingly well in the charts. I know you're selling like over 100,000, regularly a month, which is fantastic. So, but you still sign with traditional publishing. So what would you say to people, who are really, like myself, I've been conflicted about this. What is your opinion about the market right now? What should people be thinking?
Well, here's the thing. And if you're looking at the market right now, at this instant, we just had a new broker study and BISG studies come out, that's the book industry study group, that showed that here in the United States, ebooks have climbed to about 28 to 30% of the market, but that still means that 70% of your readers are buying physical books. And I know from knowing my own readers and the fan letters I get and the notes I get from them that even though a vast majority of them are buying my ebooks, they still want a physical product to put on their bookshelf. They have ownership in that. That like reflects their personality. And I think that's actually going to be the future of publishing. It is perhaps not publishing every book out there in print, but the books that readers really become wedded to, like my readers have proven that with Blind Faith, that they actually want a physical copy. That's important to them. So I knew my readers still want to see me in bookstores. So that's why I've signed. I also still am learning so much about this industry. And one of the best ways I found to learn it, and this is one of the reasons why I just signed a second contract for a YA with another New York City publisher, is that it helps me learn the marketing. It helps me learn what works and what doesn't work as far as packaging a book. And these are all things that I can take back and use in my self-published books. And in fact, I have. So in a way, I'm getting paid to be educated while at the same time I'm making money on my own. So I really think it's the best of all worlds for everyone, for readers, writers, agents selling subrights, and publishers. I think the publishers are probably struggling the most, though, because they're trying to find their path in all this chaos. But for us writers, it's really a question of knowing what our vision is. If you're just starting out and you have the kind of book that you know is such a high concept, wonderful idea that you could reach a worldwide audience and you could compete with New York Times best-selling authors, then maybe a traditional publisher might be the way to go, because they have right now the ability to reach that other 70% of the reading population and to package you and build you. Now, if you're someone who has already made a connection with readers, especially if they're online, perhaps through like short stories or things like that, and you know that you have the ability to continue that engagement by self-publishing and by connecting with them online, then doing the indie publishing, ebooks, might be better suited for you. So I think each of us has to find our path. And just like my path has had a lot of downs as well as a lot of ups, everyone's going to find that. So, you know, it's not just making one choice about your career. It's going to be making one choice for now and then looking at the next fork in the road, you know, in about 3 or 4, 6 months.
Yeah, and it is amazing, but it's... let me go straight into asking you about your secret, because I think this will also go into what I was about to say. So you are selling all these books every month, so everybody wants to know, what is the marketing secret? What is the way to do this?
Okay, all right, here's the secret. Everyone, you got a pen, you got a piece of paper, you ready? This is the secret, okay? Big deal. You need to write more books. They have to be good books, and you have to give your readers time to find them and to tell their friends. That's it. That's it. That's the magic. If you think about it, that's exactly what New York City Publishing is doing. That's what bookstores do when they keep those books out there out front longer to give people time to find them. But what it boils down to, and what writers don't like, is there is the writing more books that are good books, which is work. And then there's the giving your readers time to find them, which is patience.
Yeah.
Oh, what 2 things do we usually not want to deal with? Working hard and patience. So.
Oh, no, I agree with you. And I mean, obviously, I knew you were going to say that, but it is... That's the thing, and that's both a curse and a blessing. You know, it is a lot of work, but also it's a blessing because we've got this time. And you think that, okay, so oh my goodness, I've made this decision about this book, but that's not it. That's not it for us. You know, you've got these 16 now more books. We had breakfast in New York, and around the table there was about 200 books. You know, out of 3 authors. It was amazing. You know, maybe
I think there was even more than that. Yeah,
I mean, ridiculous numbers of books written around the table with these ladies, and you know, that's, to me, that's what Thriller Fest gave me. It was this ability to see that being at the bottom of the ladder is just, you know, it's a step, and you can see people on the ladder, but they are older and wiser, and they've worked hard, and they've had patience along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's important. The tipping point for me when I started was about 4 to 6 books, 4 to 6 months. I think that might actually be compressing nowadays, now that we have more people finding ebooks more easily with all the search engines and blogs and Twitter, feeds out there. So that might actually be faster for some new people. I do think it might be a challenge, though, in the next year or so, as so many traditionally published authors get the rights back to their backlist because their names are already well known. So for a new person starting out, maybe in 6 to 8 months or a year from now, it might be a bit more of a challenge, and they might need to work harder at getting more books out there and at giving their readers time to find them and encouraging their readers to talk about them and spread the words. But really, I mean, if you write a good book and you have follow-up, it's going to be really hard for the people that only write one book. But if you write a good book and you're able to give your reader instant satisfaction with when they finish that book, there's another book out there for them to buy, they're going to buy it. So you just have to trust that it works very well.
And it does work well, but I think there's a caveat, and you helped me with this, which is the whole promise to the reader and around in terms of author branding, in terms of promise to the reader. So you helped me come up with, my tagline, ancient mystery, modern thrill, which really helps the reader know what they're getting. It helps me know more about my brand, the imaging, all of those things. Now, if people, and last night I was at an event where people were saying, but I just want to write all different books. I want to do all different things, So how, when we're talking about writing the next book, how does that fit with branding, and what are the tips you can give around that?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to know yourself. And that's what actually became the heart of your brand and my brand, is knowing the kind of books, the kind of stories that we love and that we want to tell. Like I said, I just signed a contract for a YA. Well, those are going to be YA thrillers with heart. I mean, they are still going to be thrillers, but they're going to be very much about the relationships that these young people are struggling with. So that totally fits in my brand, even though it's a different audience. Now, here's the thing, though. If you want to write, say, Amish romances, which are very sweet and there's no sex in them, and you also want to write the next 50 Shades of Grey, then you have to plan for that in your business plan. And you might have to find yourself, it's like a product line for, a company. For instance, Procter & Gamble over here in the U.S. Well, they make everything from Tide laundry detergent to toothpaste. And they're not going to put out 20 different kinds of toothpaste if that's a new market for them. They're going to put out one. And then when people love that, they're going to have another one that's just like it, only a little different. And they're going to build that brand. And then they'll go and build the Tide laundry detergent brand. So you might find yourself either using pen names if they're very divergent reader groups and audiences, or if you actually can encompass all of it under one brand, you might do better keeping your own name. And it might be more of, well, if you like, a little bit of romance with your thrills, which is, in my case, I do have some romantic thrillers in addition to some straight mainstream FBI thrillers, then I steer that audience towards my Hart and Drake medical suspense series, because those do have some explicit sex and lots of romance, but they're very much in that thriller pacing. If people really just like the FBI stuff, then I steer them to the Lucy Gardino series. And the new series will be Blind Faith is actually the first book of, which will be the Caitlin Tierney FBI series. So it's not that I have to change my brand. The books are still very much thrillers with heart, and that's what sets them apart from anyone else's books. But I have to understand that it's going to take longer to grow each segment of my brand if I am dividing my audience. So if you're just starting out, I would recommend focusing on one audience, build them. Now, that might still be a wide spectrum of books. I mean, look at the romance readers. They'll read anything from historical to Western to thriller, and a lot of them will read across the spectrum. So if you know your audience, you can understand how defined your brand has to be. But once you build that, then it's a lot easier to kind of steer segments of the audience in other directions. So I guess that would be my counsel, is to start with your brand that you really love, be passionate about it, have a clear vision of the kind of promise you're making your reader, and keep writing books that fulfill that promise. And then once you have a readership, it's much easier to do a little divergence.
Absolutely. And then, of course, if they read one, they love it, they'll go to buy the next one, and they won't be disappointed. They'll be so happy because it fulfills their expectation. And I think people get a little bit het up about that and think that it somehow, is against some kind of creative spirit that we can just, but what I like about you and the Pro Writer series that we've been putting together is the idea that the author is a business, we're entrepreneurs, and you talk then about having a business plan, and that being a professional writer with making money is important to both of us. So I wondered if you could talk about that. What is a pro writer in your definition?
Well, to me, a pro writer, and this is a big difference between someone that is just enjoying writing and enjoying calling themselves a writer. A pro writer consistently puts out good quality products, since we're talking professionalism, we will call them products instead of stories. That doesn't mean they're any less creative, but they are putting out good quality products that are satisfying the readers, and they are keeping their promise to the reader. So I always say writers write, successful writers keep writing. And in fact, my own journey has certainly proven that. But that doesn't mean that you have to lock yourself into any particular genre. It doesn't mean you have to use a formula to write. What it means is you're making a promise to your readers, and you're going to continue to fulfill that by writing the books they love. Now, you can push the boundaries and experiment. I've even had paranormal elements in some of my books, along with various types of romance and degrees of sexual, episodes. So, you can push the boundaries, but a pro writer will keep writing and will keep their audience happy. And in fact, the best words of advice I have for any new professional writer are the words that Jeffrey Deaver gave to me when my first book was out. And we were sitting at an awards banquet, and both our books won, so that was kind of fun. And I asked him, I said, my second book's about ready to come out. What advice would you have for someone in my situation? And he said, just never forget the reader is God. And at first that seems very simplistic. And you might even shy away from it because it feels like, oh, I'm not writing to a person. I'm writing from my heart. Well, you still write from your heart with the first draft. I mean, my first drafts are very messy and very selfishly just for me. I'm having fun. But before you publish that book, because when you publish a book, it becomes a product. So before you publish that book, you think about your reader first, and you go back, and every revision and every choice you make as far as editing and tightening and points of view has to be about what is going to give my reader more bang for their buck. What is going to make it worthwhile that they feel delighted to have invested their time and their energy and their money in my books. And that will make them want to turn to the next book immediately and buy it. That's what you have to be thinking. So if you keep that in mind, everything else actually falls into place quite nicely.
Well, and again, I think for some people this is a big mind shift, because when we start writing and when we love to write, a lot of it is very much what's in us. Or when you talked about a grief journal, then a lot of people would have written a grief journal about their life. It's a kind of confessional way of writing. It's very personal. But what we're talking about is, yes, sure, do all of that in your first draft, but then shift your mind entirely to the reader perspective and stop being selfish. That's what we're saying, really.
Basically, yes. In fact, I think of my first draft as a very selfish draft. I have fun, I play around. But my second draft, I actually call it my revisioning draft. In other words, not just revising, where I'm playing with words, but revisioning, looking at the big picture from a reader. Stephen King says this in his wonderful book on writing, that he often will put his first draft in a drawer for a couple months so that he can come back to it with a reader's eye. He also uses his wife Tabitha as his perfect reader. And so if she stumbles on something, he just gets the red pen out. Okay, didn't work for Tabitha, it's not going to work for my other readers. So I think it's very important. And again, if you're treating this as, I want to publish, which means you want readers to look at your work.
Yes.
You have to treat it as a product at that point and invite opinions, just like a big business would get an opinion group on any new product that they launched. So you have to be open to that. And I think as writers, sometimes we guard our heart too much. We're like, oh, I can't change that. I love that line. well, if it doesn't work for the reader, then it might be a lovely piece of prose, but it doesn't work for the reader. Therefore, it has to go. It's kind of that old Buddhist saying, you know, kill your darlings, kill the Buddha if you see him on the road.
Yeah, and I was going to say that is exactly the definition of kill your darlings, and I think it really only. I think I only got it this week, actually, because I finished the first draft of the third Arcane novel before Thriller Fest, and you know, 2.5 weeks later, I started reading it this week for the first rewrite, and there was a whole section I went off on some, you know, nuclear physics tack, and then I was like, yeah, it was really interesting, but it doesn't really fit.
Well, don't feel bad, because I mean, I still do it every time. I actually have a little folder on my computer for each book that I just call snips. Yeah. And it's where I put stuff in there. And you know what's funny is a lot of times I'll come back and actually use those pieces, but somewhere else. It was just that at the time of writing the first draft, I was writing so hard to get everything down, I didn't realize it didn't fit in that particular piece. And sometimes I'll use them in other books. It's like once you get into a real creative surge, your brain starts working overtime, and sometimes you don't realize it, but you're actually writing things that don't belong in that story, but do deserve their own story. So that actually makes you more productive, because then you already have the start to another story right there. So I think people have to not be afraid of that red pen editing kind of thinking, because it can actually not only make the current book better, it can actually seed your future books so that you never have to worry about writer's block.
And there is so much we could talk about, but actually we have already talked about a lot of these things. And I should tell people, the Pro Writer series is now fully available. We've got 4 modules. So people can go to thecreativepenn.com/Pro Writer and have a look. But can you just explain why you wanted to do the 4 modules, and you know why you're so passionate about sharing this information? And I should say we have over 24 hours of interview with CJ in those courses.
Okay. So. There's tons of material in there. And that's just the interviews. There's also the written material.
So much.
From me, but from guests. And Joanna shared all of her technical secrets to how to do the self-publishing with all the platforms, as well as her marketing secrets of social media. So, you know, kudos to you as well. Honestly, though, I had a very selfish reason for sharing all this and for creating my NoRulesJustWrite.com blog. And that was just the practicality of there's only so many hours in a day. Yep. And as I became more popular as a fiction novelist, my readers were just demanding that I write faster and that I get more books out to them. And so I had to cut back on my second love, which is teaching. I love teaching. But when I teach an online course, I can't get any writing done that month because I get so involved with my students and I'm there all the time answering questions and things. And so I've actually pretty much, I think there's maybe 2 more online courses scheduled over the next 2 years. Other than that, I've said no to just about everything. I've even had to cut back on some of my live speaking engagements. But it's such a renaissance for writers, and not just a renaissance as far as new things happening and new technology, but a revolution in our thinking and our skill set. So since I was able to kind of learn so much so fast, I thought, well, if I can put this all in one place, what a great shortcut for people so that they won't have to take the time and energy and the missteps that I had on my journey. So that's really why I created the blog and why I was so thrilled about taking everything even deeper with the Pro Writer series, because there's no way I could give up 24 hours of writing, you know, over a period of time to teach that over and over and over again. So now it's all there, it's all in one place, and as things change, we can add to it, you know, we can answer comments, we can give people guidance. It's very personal, which actually you and I both have already done for some of our students. It's all right there. So I love that idea of it's convenient for them and it's convenient for us. So it's a win-win.
Exactly. And when we started doing that in February, I think it took us about 4 months on and off to do all 4 modules. So we have Secrets of Traditional Publishing, which I think I will have recorded this in the introduction, but I signed with an agent, as you know, a New York agent, and I absolutely credit the information that I learned from you in that course. As I interviewed you.
Well, see, it works.
It does work, but also the stuff on contracts was really useful for me because it made me think about business. This is a business. And we also have Secrets of a Pro Writer, where we do go into a lot of the entrepreneurial stuff as well as creativity. We have Secrets of Independent Authors, and also the marketing module, which is huge. Really mega, mega huge. So if people want more of CJ, and indeed of myself, you can go to thecreativepenn.com/pro writer. So, finally, tell us where people can find you and find all your books, in fact.
Well, my fiction is cjlyons.net, and I do have a newsletter called Thrillers with Heart, and if you sign up for that, you get the first issue for free, which features an interview with Sandra Brown. And in the back of that issue is a little page that will give you information on how to get a free book from me. So if you're interested in my fiction, you can actually go there and get a free book. Blind Faith will be out in all the major U.S. stores, including Target, Walmart, all the major bookstores, a lot of the airport bookstores. On July 31st is, of course, available on all the online venues. And then the Little Brown UK ebook will be available on all the UK sites. So it's going to be a really thrilling July 31st for me.
It's going to be brilliant. So thanks ever so much for your time, CJ. That was great.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.